My name is Mike Westfall, and this is the Treetop Pavilion, a derelict 19th century cricket pavilion that I'm transforming into a wonderful weekend retreat. Nearly all the materials are coming from here in the woods, which are also the home of a mountain bike track. Simon the carpenter helped me draw up some plans, and so far we've laid the footings. Harry, Simon and the guys have built a substantial timber frame which spans the old building. Robin has been tackling the electrics and plumbing, and we've got the roof almost finished, bar the wooden shingles. Today, however, I'm taking the day off to gain some inspiration from a rather interesting housing development that's been built on a brownfield site in Sutton.
So what does a high-density housing development on an old sewage works in South London have to do with Treetops and my work in Penshurst? Well, let me tell you, plenty, because there are lessons to be learned here. These people have reduced their power requirement by an enormous margin. Heating is down 90%, electricity is halved, and the great thing, all the energy comes from biomass fuel, which is wood chip to you and I've got loads of it.
The development, known as BedZ, incorporates both residential and commercial units and has been built using, wherever possible, natural, renewable or recycled building materials from within a 35-mile radius of the site.
This is the BedZ show home, and through this door you will see there's this wonderful two-storey passive solar heating conservatory way up there. For some reason it has a New Zealand or an Australian tree fern. I don't quite know why, but anyway, this wonderful big space here will capture heat during the day and keep the building warm inside. So the show home's arranged with the bedrooms on the ground floor, one either side, and the bathroom in here. People like power showers. Well, this is a power shower, but without the extra electrical pump. Apparently the design of the nozzle is something brilliant, and it does a really effective job. Dual flush loo, obviously that saves a lot of water, and a AAA rated appliance. Now these are supplied with the unit, so you don't bring your own horrible old D-rated one in, you get the AAA, which is grand. And a radiator. Now the radiator obviously dries the towels, but also heats the building. And it's the only rad, I think, in the building, with one exception, which is out here. This is the emergency radiator should the temperatures fall dramatically outside. So should things get really bad, the thermostat will kick in and this will switch on. And upstairs there's lots more to play with. Come and see. I think it's quite fun actually. I like these houses. Here on the upper floor, another bedroom, small bathroom and loo, and the main living room and kitchen. Jolly nice. You can see how thick the walls are here. And they're enormous. And of course that's because there's so much insulation in them. Triple glazed units all over the place. Interesting kitchen feature here. This is what I would describe as conspicuous consumption, because there's a little small window here and the meters are running inside. So through the window you can see just how much power you're using. Beach worktop, oak table. Where's the garden? Believe it or not, out here, over the bridge. Sur le pont d'Avignon. So here's the garden, and it's on top of a workstation that's over the road, and of course it's connected by the bridge. And in this urban setting, it's marvellous that every one of the units has its own outside space. And you can see there's one here, and there's one just above us up there. Isn't that fantastic? In such an urban setting, they've really thought about all these details. I like these places.
The site has its own power plant, housed in this rather distinctive building. And it's here that I picked the brains of Andrew Tolfs, a forester responsible for providing the fuel for the plant.
Wow, this is a big room, eh?
It is.
Right. So, Andrew, here's your fuel source.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, first of all, where do you get it from?
At the moment it comes from a sawmill, but very soon we're going to be making our own wood chip coming from Croydon, just 6 miles down the road. And it's going to be all nice and shipped up like that and flow down into the gasifier in the end.
Well, that's all very well, but how does it get from here to there to start with?
Right, okay, well you see this grab up here, that's computer controlled to come across and pick up a bite of wood chip every time that the hopper up there gets empty.
Well, Andrew, this is a pretty impressive bit of kit.
Yeah.
Can you explain how it works?
Yeah, this is the heart of our whole power plant. It's the gasifier. The dry wood chip comes in the top, falls down, settles on a grate there, and there it's really quite hot, about 800 degrees, and that causes the wood to break down, and you get, as I say, a combustible gas which goes through to power our engine essentially, which drives a generator that produces all the electricity we use.
And heat, obviously there's plenty of heat.
Yeah, that is really hot, you don't want to touch that.
Nothing goes to waste here. They collect all the heat in a heat exchanger and using a series of hot water pipes transmit it to the houses. So no one needs to install a separate central heating system. Very clever.
Well, here we are in the room above the generator, and you certainly know you've arrived before you get up the stairs. This is where they reprocess the grey and the foul water from the building. Oxygen's blown up through it to keep the process bubbling along rapidly, and there's a breakdown of pathogens, and it's turning into water which is pretty clean. I mean, sometimes these things actually produce drinking water. This isn't drinking water. What's going to come out of this is water to flush the loos, but hey, you know, it's still useful use of the water, and it doesn't get wasted and doesn't get to fill up tanks in the ground. And look at this, you actually have reeds growing on mats floating in the tanks. Isn't that amazing? And the same here with a bit of dead nettle. It's a little bit more solid, that one. I don't think I want to put my hand in there.
In many ways, I'm trying to do exactly the same, but on a much, much smaller scale. Being up here in the woods means I have to be a little bit more self-sufficient than your average house.
So, no mains electricity, what do? You get in batteries. And we've worked out the power requirement and all that other stuff, and I'll go into the details of that later. But it's all based on your minimum requirement, caravan lighting and so on. And the batteries will be lovely, they'll be housed over there, and that'll be great. But how do you power them up? Well, we've been given a list of Jenny, and it's a beautiful old bit of kit, and I really appreciate the guys who gave it to us. Wonderful gesture. And it'll do a great job. But I've always been in love with the idea of wind power. Why not? Why can't you harvest the wind that blows all over the place? Well, there's a man inside with a degree in electrical engineering, and he'll explain why. It's all his fault. Well, Robin, what I find amazing is, here we are, on this top of this hugely steep slope, and I can't have a wind turbine.
You can have a wind turbine on the edge of this slope. It will produce a tiny output, but you're baffled by the slope and the trees above you, so that wind coming up the slope at those trees is going to be reflected back, and you'll have a turbulent airstream, which will do the wind turbine no favours at all.
Yeah.
You need a jet stream for a wind turbine to work well.
Yeah, and of course that's the direction of the prevailing wind, isn't it?
Mostly, yes, although it wouldn't matter from which
southwest.
direction the wind was coming. If the wind was coming from those trees or at those trees, you would still get very little output from the machine.
Yeah.
That's compounded by the fact that we're in the southeast of England, where wind speeds are not as high as on the coast or further north. In order for a machine to work here at all, the machine's blade would need to be about 6 metres clear of the tree canopy, 20 feet above the top of the trees.
Yeah.
So if your tree canopy is estimating 40 feet, that means a tower 60 feet high. And that's as high as an electricity pylon. And you're unlikely to get planning permission for that. And the cost of a tower with a suitable sized machine on top of it is going to be in the region of £10,000 to £20,000 second hand. If you start going new, it might be more expensive still.
Well, I think that explains extremely succinctly why we're having a generator.
This is Harry, who is very delicately knocking out an old window. Now, once he's finished doing that, we'll need to have a chat with him about building a container for the lead-acid storage batteries we'll be using here in the woods.
Then the roof slope, which will extend over about this sort of distance, would want to drop maybe 6 inches in that distance.
Are you imagining the floor being the same sort of level as that?
No, I'm imagining the floor being quite a lot lower than that.
Okay. How big is it?
The battery is...
So how big is the box? How many
feet wide?
Batteries come to about, if they're in a single row, about 1,200, I think.
4 foot.
Yeah.
A bit of ply.
Oh, a bit of ply and just some weatherboard over the top of it.
Can't we just have a felt roof?
Sorry?
Can't we just have a felt roof? Or shingles? How about shingles? Prettier. These are just so bloody heavy rather than anything else.
Yes, it'll be hard work lifting the lid up.
This is the battery box I made up to Robin's very exact specifications yesterday. Let's finish it off, put some doors on which will go on T-hinges. Had to work to very precise heights and widths and which was a struggle to get it all to fit in underneath the windowsill and keep above ground level, but we've just about done it. This is going to be the fixed panel to hide the batteries, which is going to have a bit of insulation chopped in that void there. It's the lid, which will have a pair of hinges on it, so you can do that. Get in and have a look at the batteries. And all these top surfaces will be covered with shingles, so they match the roof. Another little pair of doors for the storage at the end. Which again will go on T-hinges when I've got some. Just leaves me top and the end to weatherboard. And that should keep Robin happy, which obviously is a very important part of my life.
So we're rapidly transforming our old cricket pavilion into a wonderful weekend retreat, but there's something missing: wooden shingles.
So, what makes a good shingle, I hear you ask? Well, English Heritage would tell you oak. Well, they would, wouldn't they? They've got a bigger budget than me. Oak's expensive, but of course, if you're doing a big church spire, you'd want something that lasts because it's a long way up there to fix them. We're going to use conifer, in the main cedar and red larch. This is cedar. You see, it suffers from butt rot, conifer butt rot, or foamies as it's called. And this is 20 foot up the butt, so you lose a lot of it. It's still got that lovely cedar smell, which is why it was used for drawers, because it kept the moss out of your drawers. So, good stuff. You'll see some over here we've milled earlier. Now, you're looking for a nice straight grain, because you're going to cut with the grain, and not too many knots. Well, it's got one or two, but you have to live with that. It's got a bit of butt rot in the bottom here, but that's okay, because that's where it'll be clamped. So we'll be cutting the shingles off the top, kind of rocking motion, down to there, and then that bit will be discarded. So it won't be too big a problem. I always say avoid chestnut. Chestnut curls and splits and so forth. But red larch is pretty good, and I've got some red larch over here we milled yesterday. And we can go and have a play with that if you like. Let's have a look. So 15-inch, approximately there, isn't it? Good. So we'll cube this up, and then we'll run it over to James to the shingle cutter. One of the problems with red larch, is the larch wasp and the larch wasp larvae. And you can see various little holes in here. And there's one particularly bad one there. And that is made by the larvae of the larch wasp, which is a perfectly safe animal in terms of you and I. But it looks so dangerous, you wouldn't believe it. And I know a chap who got barred from a pub for years for releasing a few. I just happen to have one here. Let's see it. Walk this way. Sam, do you want to try and catch him as he comes out? Or more likely she. There we are. Go on then, your chance to shine. See that? Look at the big proboscis on it. It looks like a sting, but actually it's not. It's for laying eggs. It's an egg-laying tube where it pushes it in behind the bark and drops your little wasp larvae. But he looks quite a dangerous beast, doesn't he?
So, to cut the large blocks into shingles, I've come to the yard of James Andrews. Now, James was a man who was around in the '87 storm and could see that the oak that people were virtually throwing away would be a great asset in the future. And it certainly has been, and he's been very shrewd and looked after it, and now does a roaring trade in nice old dry oak. James shares my passion for timber buildings, and as you can probably guess, this is his house. He's fitted a series of cams to the milling machine, which changes the angle of the blocks between each cut.
And there you see it, you see? Because of the cam, you get a thin and a thick cut. And then in consecutive runs, the can's up or down. And so you either get them cutting this way or this way. And then you get a nice chamfer on it. Light, weighs practically nothing. And they reckon last about 50 years. Apparently you're supposed to take them all off after about 30 years and turn them over. Here we are on the roof, and we're looking at the coffin tanks. These are the coffin tanks which we're using as a water supply. The reason we're using these is because a lot of people up here on the top of the hill tend to turn their hoses on for swimming pools and watering and stuff when the weather's hot. You lose your pressure. So we've got two large tanks, end to end. In fact, you can see the join between them here. Two large tanks, and we've joined them together, and we've got a small pump, a little header tank. So I think that'll give us enough pressure and a big enough supply. Now, the reason we're messing around up here is because we've had to insulate all this. The tanks must be kept relatively warm. We don't want a cold northeaster freezing them. So we put this high density polyurethane on. And you can see a bit of it on the floor here. It's got a silver back and it really does do a magnificent job. This polyurethane doesn't let any heat through, and the silver helps as well. So I'm hoping these tanks will be nice and warm in there and we won't have any freezing problems, which wouldn't be a bad thing. Now, these other roofs, as you can see from underneath, have not been insulated because it's just going to be plain storage. But they have got this sort of white paper on. Well, on closer inspection, it's not exactly paper. It's what they used to call roofing felt in the old days. It's the modern equivalent of roofing felt. It's very tough and strong, really great stuff, but it is breathable. So condensation on the inside can evaporate through it, and it stops it dripping down the building and causing rot. So we've got that on the roof. Now, along with being breathable, it also does give a little bit more protection, because bear in mind, this will only have wooden shingles on it, not slates or tiles or stuff. And they are prone to dropping a little tiny ring out. It's actually a knot, and they've got loose knots in red larch. They can fall out. So the extra protection from the paper, not a bad thing. And the battens are on, so the next thing is putting on the shingles. So my job. He's a real chippy. I'm just an old has-been shop fitter, and Harry's going to show me how to fit shingles, and I can't wait to learn. Over to you, Harry.
Slightly making it up as I go along. I've done a lot of peg tile roofing, a fair bit of slating. Shingling's a bit of a new one, but I think we can apply the same principles. I generally work, to get our gauge in the bottom, I work to a second joint on my finger.
Right.
Then you haven't got to worry about holding a tape measure. Hold it like that. Fix it on. I've got my own hammer, Mike.
Oh, that's lucky.
Experienced carpenter, just about. Supply a hammer.
Right.
A couple of nails like that. Trying to use the thin ones up down the bottom. The short ones, rather.
Yeah. And giving it a slight lip, I notice. Is that intended?
Lip which way?
Well, a slight lip dropping down, so that shingle look, so it's not an even line.
Well, along the bottom we're keeping vaguely even within the sort of irregularities of the shingles.
The cut, okay.
Yeah, but when we get higher up, because the bottom you won't really see, it'll be in the gutter and it wants to work something like straight. And the next one will go like that.
Oh, I see. So you run it to the same line, so you end up with sort of an extra thick drip, effectively.
Yeah, because otherwise when you get the joint of these two that'll go there, there would just be a gap.
Yeah,
so you've got to have something, staggered joint under that.
No, honestly, I knew that. I'm just doing it for the sake of the viewer.
Yeah, obviously.
Obviously.
They might have more intelligence than you think, Mike.
Might have a lot more than me, I should imagine. It'd be a worry if they don't. They probably wouldn't know how to turn the telly on if they didn't have more intelligence than me.
Sure, you do yourself down, Mike.
Well, I like to get in first on that.
Before anyone else does.
Quite. Right, so just trimming a few up to get the short ones.
Trimming a few up to get the bottom. You can't just go whizzing along the bottom and do that first, otherwise we'd get out of step. Because they're all different sizes, you have to sort of think about it a bit.
Okay. So
your fingers might be a different size to me, so...
Well, okay, I'm just going to trim a few of these up so that I can break this very thin cut edge off.
Oh, yeah.
And get them the right lengths, which will be helpful, I hope.
There's a knot under that one.
Oh, I see quite a gap. In fact, it's probably better to go with the grain, isn't it? Because they do seem to be slightly bowed one way or the other. I suppose it's being out in the sun.
Yeah, that is what happens to shingles. The top bit dries because it's got the sun coming down on it, which means obviously it shrinks, so that curls out.
Yeah.
Which is just the way it is, you accept it.
Nature of the beast. Right.
More shingles.
Good news, the batteries have finally arrived, and there seem to be rather a lot of them.
Well, Robin, at last, here they are, and they look lovely. What are they?
There is a large capacity lead acid battery there. That's 900 ampere hours at 12 volts. Even something like a fridge, because it runs 24 hours, is going to use an unreal amount of electricity over the course of a week. What we hope to do with these batteries is to use them fairly gently, to pull them down to about 20% of their full capacity and no more. So we're actually leaving 80% of the charge in there semi-permanently. This maximises the life of the batteries. In theory, we will get a life approaching 20 years, maybe even more if they're looked after correctly.
That'll be marvellous. I mean, that'll be our, lights in the middle of the night. We don't have to start
right.
the Jenny, which is wonderful.
Yep. These represent a fairly small energy storage in real terms. You've got, if you were to use the total capacity, about 10 units of electricity stored there, 10 kilowatt hours. So you could run a 1 kilowatt fire for 10 hours.
Here we are, remote site, and if we want electricity, we have to make these compromises. And we've got that shed there for other storage stuff. And I believe that in here, you're going to show us some wonderful consumer units and things of that nature. And as we open the cupboard, you can see how simple the whole thing is. There's nothing to it. It's just 1 or 2 wires. And I'm sure Robin will have that fixed in a trice. Well, building like true love rarely runs smooth, and this certainly didn't. We ran out of shingles. Frankly, we cut them too fat and we wasted too much in the process. So we bought some in. It saved felling another tree, and I wasn't going to do that. But blimey, it was just in time, and I don't think it's too bad. I think in time it'll fade in and look the part. So I'm not unhappy with it. In fact, I'm very happy with it. And yeah, as I say, just in time, it's chucking it down. Hey ho, that's building.